I was born in Phillips, Wisconsin in 1919, and that was the end of the First World War. And when I was 3 years old, we left Phillips, and my father decided to retire, and we moved to Idaho. He was from Bohemia, and the country was similar, and he liked it. They had fruit and things like that. So he moved to that small town, and then he kind of worked in real estate and things like that, but he retired from his active business. My upbringing was more or less European because he was 38 when he came over here, 38 when he got married, and then had those 12 kids. He was a baker by trade, but he had his father was the manager of the Imperial Opera House in Vienna. So my father had worked there in the lighting and things like that. And we lived we had about an acre. It was in town, but at that time almost everybody had a garden, and we had a cow and chickens, and we were pretty self-sufficient. And I had a very pleasant life since I was the youngest of all the children. And I graduated from high school in Nampa in 1936. It was a depression when I graduated, and of course it was hard to get a job. But my father was, I would say, rather forward-thinking for people because he insisted on everybody in our family either going on to school or learning some kind of trade or having enough education to take care of yourself and get a job. And that was always stressed for boys and girls both. That was So I decided I wanted to be a dress designer. So at that time it was didn't know where to go to school and didn't have that much money. And it so happened that they opened a design, it was during the Depression, and it was sort of a vocational school, and over here in Boise. So I came over, and we learned how to make patterns and design clothes and everything. So I went there for 2 years, and then I went back up to the university for 1 year, and then I went to work in Portland, Oregon, and lived with my sister. And so I worked in a real exclusive dress shop in Portland. Berg's was the name of it. And I worked there a couple of years, and then I decided to go to San Francisco, that I wanted to get in a better place. So I got a job as an apprentice to a French milliner. And she was really good, and I learned a lot there, but then the war came along. Everybody got all patriotic and got married, so I got married. My brother had a bakery at Cascade, and I used to spend the summers there, and I met my husband, Jack Richmond. Well, my brother had that bakery up there, and in it, he had a lunch counter, and of course I worked there, and Jack was always coming in there to eat.
So Betty would come up to Cascade from Nampa every summer, since her brother owned a bakery, and I'd go in there, and that's when I first saw Betty. And I remember how she was really a beautiful, flashing eyes and pure white teeth, and she did have a few pimples drinking too many milkshakes, but she had a really beautiful form, in my opinion. And I often wondered about this was the type of a girl, strong and healthy, that if I ever got married, which I didn't think about then, that I would want to be the mother of my children.
In 1942, the war was going on, and Jack went to Alaska. We got married, and then he had to go to Alaska and worked at the Aleutian Islands on the airports and the Japanese came. He was saying they came and bombed there, but it was a desolate place, but they had this air base there. And so I stayed home in Boise, and I had a baby, and Vicky was born in 42, and Jack had to stay in Alaska. He came home in the late part of 42 to Boise.
and Vicki was born in 42. And then Jack came home, and he worked for Morrison Knudsen, which is a worldwide construction company. Then, let's see, I had another baby, Jim, and then I had another baby, Bill. Mm-hmm. And then Jack went to, had a chance to go to Sri Lanka. And then he came home, and then we continued, and then as the kids grew up, were growing up in Boise. We lived in Boise, and the kids grew up in Boise and went to school and graduated from Boise High School. Vicki and Jim were 2 years apart, and then 4 years for Bill. And it was hard, but you just make it do what you have to, and we had a Model T Ford. We put benches in the back of that Ford, and all the kids used to get in the back of that old Model T, and you had to crank it with a crank, and so I'd crank it up and take off, and we managed. Jack was working for MK. Then he went with another company when he came back from Ceylon. He started working for McGregor Triangle, and they were building roads. He was an engineer and a superintendent of the construction for roads and heavy-duty things like that. Oh, that was wonderful. That was like a 3 months camping. And I would always complain about it, but after I got moved up to those camps, it was just like a summer camping for 3 months. And the kids really enjoyed it because we were making the Lewis and Clark Highway, building the Lewis and Clark Highway, and that was there were no roads up there. So the fishing was fantastic. 3 families up there with children. And so the children would all play together. There were about 10 of them all together. So once in a while I'd get them all together and we'd put on a little play or do something, so we'd kind of keep going, and then we'd invite all the men to come and we'd have a little party. And the kids really enjoyed those summers because they got to see a side of life that was different than living in town. We went to Honduras, and so Bill was the only one left at home at that time. And so he went, and we were back in the jungles there, building a road from Honduras to over the mountains into Salvador. And there was nothing there. That was really primitive. Of course, there were no stores or anything, and an airplane came in once every 2 weeks and brought our groceries. And so then we came home from there, and I think Jack I built a lot of roads in Idaho, up in North Idaho, and he decided to quit the construction business, and by that time he was 50, I think he was 55, and so he got a job with the state in the building department. And then I decided I was going to travel around, and so I traveled with the Experiment in International Living, and this organization had foreign people come over to the United States and stay for 3 months. It was usually university students, and they would spend 1 month at the university trying to learn the language, 1 month with a family so they could see how family living was, and then 1 month touring the United States. Those students would stay with me. So then they had a program for the people that kept the students. Once every 2 years, we would take a big trip into some country, and we would stay for 3 weeks, and we would spend a week at the university and a week at a family, and then a week touring the country. Went to Japan, Turkey, Egypt, I think And so we would spend that time there, and the program was to make people get acquainted with the other countries. So I did that for about 10 years. Oh, the people in Japan, you wouldn't believe how hospitable they are. And at that time, everybody liked the United States. We were considered the best thing in the world. You know, the people at that time, the ones that participated in that program were mostly teachers or lawyers or people like that, you know. And so they were all interested in other countries, and so that was a real good experience. I go over, that's where my father was from, and I've been over there a couple times. And then I've been on cruises. I just decided, you know, my husband spent a lot of time away from me, and I had to stay alone, and I wanted to go and see stuff, see things. And so I just told him when when those kids were raised and out of school that I was going to take my turn and go. And so I did. I would still like to travel. I love to travel and see how other people live. I think the best thing is that you just don't care anymore what anybody thinks. You just do your thing, and it doesn't make any difference if they like it or don't like it. You just feel that now you can do whatever you want. My family, there were 12 in our family, and I'm the youngest, and now everybody's gone, and that makes me sad. And I'm the last one, and I just feel like I'm the only one. My motto is do the best you can with whatever happens, because nobody can tell what's going to happen, and you just have to make the best of it.